Hello, it's Chris Hawthorne from St Anne's Church in Chasetown here with a midweek message for August the 13th. If you've been following us, I'm sure you know that we've been looking at the 7 signs and 7 words in John's Gospel. And the 7 words are often referred to as the I am sayings. And in today's midweek message, we are looking at John chapter 8, verse 58, where Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." We've looked at chapter 8 before when we heard the story of the woman who was brought before Jesus in the temple because she'd been caught in adultery. One of the key points about that particular issue was that the Jews, the Jewish authorities, were trying to trick and to trap Jesus. And the way they thought they could do it was by putting him in a corner where whichever answer he gave, he was going to be in trouble. So when this woman was caught in adultery, it says clearly in the Torah, in Deuteronomy 22:22, if a man and a woman are caught sleeping together in adultery, then they should both be put to death. And if Jesus said, yes, that's what the Torah says, stone her, then they would go to the Roman authorities and say, Jesus is telling people to execute folk, and only Roman authorities have the power to allow people to execute. That would have got Jesus in trouble with the Roman authorities. But if Jesus said, no, you shouldn't stone her, then they're going to turn on him and say, well, the Torah says we should put them to death. So you're not a prophet, you're not obeying the law. The point I'm trying to make here is a point that we make over and over again, and that is that context is very important. So a little bit further on in John chapter 8, we read the following. This is starting in John 8, verse 48. And the heading in the NIV Bible I have is Jesus' claims about himself. The Jews answered him, aren't we right in saying that you are a Samaritan and demon-possessed? I am not possessed by a demon, Jesus said, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Very truly I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death. At this they exclaimed, now we know that you are demon-possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets, yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are? Jesus replied, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, who you claim is your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him and obey his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. You're not yet 50 years old, they said to him. You've seen Abraham. Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. At this they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. This is quite a complex, quite a deep part of John's Gospel. And I'm going to approach it by looking at 3 questions which are asked, 3 answers which Jesus gives, and 3 lessons that we can learn. And again, the context here is that the Jewish authorities are trying to trick Jesus, but they've been getting nowhere. Whatever they ask him, he has an answer. He has a perfect answer, and they are not able to outsmart him, to out-debate him. And so, a little bit like children in the playground, I suppose, they turn to being rude, and they say to him, you're a Samaritan, and you're demon-possessed. And Samaritans were reviled, were hated by the Jews because they had married into other tribes, and so they weren't seen as being pure in the way that other Jews were very careful about who they married. And of course, that's just an insult to Jesus. And then when they say he's demon-possessed, well, if they're correct, then they can't have no need to trust what Jesus says, because what he says could well be from the devil. So let's deal with this question and the answer quite quickly. We can read in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 23, and Peter writes, "While being reviled, he did not revile in return." Jesus just says to them, I am not a demon. I do not have a demon. And the lesson we can learn is that Jesus' actions here teach us not to respond in kind. Don't get drawn into petty arguments. Rise above the noise and the chatter that seeks pettiness and power for its own sake. And the second question that we have to address is as follows, and it's in John 8:52, where we can read, "The Jews said to him, 'Now we know you have a demon. Abraham died, and so did the prophets, yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets who died? Who do you make yourself out to be?'" Jesus has said that those who follow him will never die. And this is a tricky and complex idea, and particularly so if you've got a closed mind and you don't actually want to hear, and more importantly, to respond. Rather, you want to challenge and deny. It's hard. What does Jesus mean? People who believe in him will not die? It sounds stupid. Worse still, to the Jewish authorities, Jesus seems to be saying that he is greater than Abraham, father of the Jewish nation. Who do you think you are? And Jesus says, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. What Jesus is saying here is that he, Jesus, identifies his own person and work as the fulfillment of all Abraham's hopes and joys. He is the Messiah, sent of God to glorify God. And now we're in very clear-cut territory. If Jesus says he's the Messiah, then the Jewish authorities, then you and I, anybody who reads this has to say, yeah, I think you're right, I'm going to follow you. Or, no, I think you're wrong, I'm not going to follow you. The Jewish authorities, of course, were not interested in being open in their hearts and their minds to what Jesus was saying. But the lesson that we have to learn is clear. Our role as Christians is to glorify God. How might we do that? Through our prayer life, through our actions, in supporting others, in supporting our church and the wider work of the church, God's universal family. And then we have this final question, and it comes in verses 56 and 57. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. You are not yet 50 years old, they said to him, and you have seen Abraham. Once again, we can hear the mockery in the tone as these words are spoken. You are not yet 50 years old. Abraham had died some 200 years before Jesus came. And in traditional Jewish thought, somebody who got to the age of 50 was deemed to be old enough and wise enough to be seen as an elder, as somebody who could take on a certain amount of responsibility. And Jesus would have been in his 30s. The Jews are bemused by the words and unable to take them seriously, never mind grasp the depth that they carry. And incredulously they say, and you have seen Abraham? Which brings us to the final answer. Before Abraham was, I am. Jesus states quite clearly that he is God. John is, of course, repeating the I am words, the words that point to Jesus' divinity. And Jesus says he existed before Abraham, as well as existing right now in front of them. And of course, we believe in faith that he is alive today. And so the response, the lesson, is very clear, that they are trying to understand what Jesus is saying, but they won't accept what he's saying. They know he's claiming to be of God, but they pick up stones to stone him. They're going to reject what he says. And so our lesson is a doctrinal lesson. Jesus is God here on earth, and our response in faith needs to be to trust him. A prayer. Living Lord God, we offer thanks for your mercy, for your love, and your offer of relationship. Give us wisdom as we seek to learn from your word. Thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good week. And keep on seeking to grow closer to God. Goodbye.